Welcome back to another Thursday episode. First up, we are looking at the massive debt piling up for students who skipped college for trade schools, only to find out that the alternative part is incredibly expensive. Then we're taking a look at the Wild West of offshore prediction markets, where a U.S. soldier recently got busted for insider trading on international geopolitics. Finally, we'll wrap up how Gen Z is relying on TikTok algorithms to find college scholarships and why that modern hustle is leading straight into a minefield of financial information. I'm Matthew White, along with my co host, Nyamki Buchanan, and this is Road to Riches. Welcome back, everyone. Uh, we're going to walk right in here with the first story of the day, which comes from the Wall Street Journal. And we're essentially looking at a story about what you heard in the intro, students taking the alternative route to college, and they're going to trade schools, they're trying to get apprenticeships, and it's looking like they're struggling with the same thing that they thought they would be struggling with if they just went to a more formal undergraduate program. Looking at the first paragraph here, more young Americans are turning to trade school to pursue in demand jobs like plumbing and electrical work, but encountering something they didn't expect: hefty price tags. And going on, the article is essentially saying, once again, like what the intro suggested, which is these students are going to trade schools, they're getting apprenticeships, maybe getting more formal training for these jobs, and they're finding themselves with similar amounts of debt. Some students find themselves, life happens, they have to drop out. Uh, and they had to get debt to go in the first place, and so now they're finding themselves with absolutely nothing to show for years worth of education and let's say $10,000 in debt, or heaven forbid even more. And so what we're looking at here is, there has been a social media trend, of course, because it's 2026. In this case, it's hashtag no debt needed. And so this social media trend is pushing young Americans towards the trades as skepticism around four-year degrees grow. And so we're looking at that. But however, because union apprenticeships and community colleges are completely swamped due to the, again, hashtag no debt needed, um, students are turning to private for-profit trade schools that can cost tens of thousands of dollars. And just a key statistic to kind of back up what we're looking at: for-profit vocational school revenue hit 5.1 billion recently, and some specialized automotive programs at schools like UTI, Universal Technical Institute. I understand it can mean different things. Uh, uh, can run
I'm
up
glad
to.
I'm not the only one that felt that when I read this
I knew
article.
it. I knew it immediately when I said it. Can okay. Universal Technical Institute can run up to $66,000. That's what a specialized automotive program can cost. And so, contrasting that with the expectation of a cheap fast track to wealth, um, or rather, we're contrasting two different stories here. We're contrasting a cheap expectation, a fast track uh, of to wealth, um, and apart from undergraduate, with the reality that this story kind of shows, which is students dropping out with, let's say $13,000 in student debt, or maybe even more, and they have nothing to show for it. And this ties perfectly with what Nyanki and I were talking about last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, sometime in the past, and even private conversations that we've had, which is these students, they follow social media trends. They they see that, maybe 4-year degrees aren't as necessary as they once were, or at least they're seeing other people on social media say that. Um, Toxic financial misinformation and educational misinformation, in my opinion. But a lot of this is growing on social media, where they see these people who are displaying their wealth, showing that, hey, I started a business. Drop shipping is a huge thing, and they look at themselves and say, you know what, I don't need a 4-year degree. What I need is just to go to a trade school. I need to learn how to be, for example, an automotive mechanic, and I can go get a job at GM, maybe Ford, um, the local car manufacturer, and or local car manufacturing plant, and I'll be set. I can simply work my way up the ladder from there. I won't get into as much debt, and I will have and I'll have more to show for it when I get out. Whereas they look at college graduates, at least what they've been told about college graduates, they graduate college, and a lot of them end up just sitting at home and not really having much to show for their degrees. Now, I will admit that for a lot of degrees, and people like Niamki and I try to warn these kids that we know that their degree is useless, though they go get their degree that is useless, or at least not useful anymore, or maybe it never was. There's a lot of the two, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. And they don't really find jobs getting out of college. They find themselves in a worse position than they were when they started their undergraduate program. And so these kids are looking at this and they're saying, "Oh, well, I'm just going to take a different route. I'm going to go into the trades. I'm not going to be like these silly people who went and wasted 4 years of their life. I'm going to go learn a trade because that's all I need to learn, and things are going to be great. Life is going to be great." And what we find, and this is what we talked about previously, is these students kid themselves when they think that either one of these are easy. That they think that they're finding an easy way out, when in reality they're simply, proving our uh, my hypothesis right, which is these kids think that they're somehow gaming the system, that success is something that you can just come into, and there's shortcuts to it, and you go to a trade school, and you say, yeah, I don't need those 4-year degrees. In fact, some of them even trick themselves and game themselves and say, well, we're better than you because we made the smarter financial decision. Well, actually, according to this article, a lot of you guys are struggling with the same things that 4-year degree people are. You're dropping out, or you're graduating with a lot of debt. Either way, uh, you're sitting on a lot of debt, and you have nothing to show for it. And so it's not a problem of what education you get. It's a problem of what kind of work are you willing to put in to your education to set yourself up for the future. There is no shortcut to success, and that's what this story kind of backs up.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say, first and foremost, I'm very optimistic for the fact that we even have an article like this, because it means that younger people are moving into the trades, and that's a very good thing. I mean, like I said, for decades now, we've had a shortage of many of the skilled trades, plumbers, electricians, etc. So moving into that space, having more people to fill those roles is a great thing. That said, as a society, we've for many years, maybe always, I don't know, but for many years, we've had this idea of trying to get rich quick. And as you mentioned, with social media coming in, and everyone seeing influencers that are flexing their lifestyles, that are flying on private jets and driving Rolls Royces and all these other things, right? Whether it's on Instagram, TikTok, whatever. I think a lot of us get a little bit of FOMO, fear of missing out with
Right.
seeing that, oh, I'm 20, I'm 25, or I'm 24, you're 25, right? But we can go on online and we can see 19 and 20-year olds living lifestyles that are way more lavish than anything we've ever really aspired to, or thought possible for our station in life.
Mhm.
And what a lot of people don't understand is that most of these guys don't actually own these things. They're renting them, or it's a set. A lot of the popular influencers, I'll put it that way, actually do have the money for these, right? Because they run their social media as a business. Let's take Mr. Beast, for example. Of course, he has millions of dollars and he's donated plenty to charity, and that's a good thing. But on the other hand, there are plenty of people that seem to be living the same lifestyle as him, but they actually struggle to pay their bills every month. And they've gone and to a set or something to take these pictures, where they're on a private jet. So we need to first take a step back and say, is what I'm seeing on the internet actually realistic? And then from there say, okay, well, what did it take to get there?
Mhm.
There's no real way to get rich quick on a reliable basis. Occasionally, you will have opportunities, right? Like some people jumped in on Bitcoin early and ended up making millions and millions of dollars. Those people are lucky. They're few and far between. You and I are probably never going to have that opportunity. And even if we do, we're unlikely to jump on it, given how unlikely and risky some of these things are. Um, but back to the main point, right? The fact that younger individuals are getting back into the trades is a great thing, but you have to understand how to do it in an efficient and affordable manner. A lot of them want to criticize people that get a 4-year degree, as you said, right? They're saying, "Oh, I didn't have to go to school for 4 years. I didn't have to pay $80,000 for my degree. Look at me. I'm 22, 20, 21, 20 years old. You know, barely any debt. Maybe a car payment or whatever, right? Barely
Mhm.
any debt, making six figures, and I'm living the dream, right?" Well, also understand that there are plenty of 4-year degrees that can put you in that exact same position, right? Depending on your location and your degree. Engineering, for example, right? I my best friend, who's an engineer in uh, North Carolina. Yeah, North Carolina. South Carolina's the bad one, I think. Yeah, yeah. So he's an hour from Charlotte in Greensboro, and he's an engineer. And his first year out of college, he made, I think it was like 130,000 or something like that. He told me. So there are legitimate opportunities within the framework of a 4-year degree to go out and make a lot of money, just like there are legitimate opportunities outside the framework of a 4-year degree to make plenty of money early on.
Right.
The difference, though, is that many of these trades don't necessarily require the schooling that these individuals are going through. I've said it on one episode before. I don't quite remember where it is, but when it comes to the trades, many states actually have their own licensing requirements. So just do whatever it takes to get your license. So with some, it may be going to a trade school. In some states, it may not be going to a trade school. Maybe you just have to do an apprenticeship. In another state, maybe you have to do trade school and an apprenticeship. I don't know. Whatever it is, find out what it is and then make that path. And a lot of people can avoid going into debt by just simply saying, I'm going to take a step back, figure out what I want and how to get there in the most reasonable way possible. Um, with that in mind, the trades are still a great option. There's massive return on investment for those. If you're able to get in and find something that you like and you're good at it, you, depending on how ambitious you are, you'll either be completely set for life or you'll just be comfortable doing what you do. And again, on the other side of things, the 4-year degree side of things. I'm comfortable doing what I do. I know, Matt, you're comfortable doing what you do, and neither one of us makes six figures.
Right.
Uh, the dollar amount, the amount of our paycheck is not the end of the world. There's a lot more to being happy and satisfied in life than just just how much you make and the type of lifestyle that you live. But since we are on the topic so heavily of paying for your schooling, that flows right into the next article that we have, and it's about finding scholarships and alternative ways to pay for your college. So this one here is an article from Sally Mae. It says TikTok made me apply inside Gen Z scholarship search habits. Uh, we really don't have to go into the nitty gritty of this one because although there is a lot of good information in here and a lot of individual points to talk about, the main idea is simply that where we look for information to make things more affordable, specifically school, is changing. When I was initially looking for scholarships and things like that and applying for school, of course the most important one was just the scholarship portal for the school. According to this chart, it is still the same one. Then I used a tool called Scholly, which was a scholarship search website. Still one of the most important. And then lastly fell back on Google search, right? But now we're getting to a point where more people are using Instagram and TikTok as more general purpose search engines. And with how much content is available on these websites, that can be a great thing, right? Because you can more easily find niche things that relate to you because of the algorithm and how it works, because of specific search terms that may be a little bit more difficult to find through a more standard search engine or something like that. So great, take all your opportunities, right? But on the other hand, anyone can post anything on TikTok. So take things with a little bit of a grain of salt. I know a lot of people who have been scammed with products and services from TikTok, uh, not necessarily specifically scholarships, but other things. And so that is something that we need to be concerned about. Um, but ultimately, at the end of the day, this is another thing that just comes out that we've said over and over again, right? When you find something that you want to do, find a way to get it done, find a way to make it affordable, and using these opportunities to find scholarships and connect with other people, connect with communities, other tools that can help you do those things is a necessary and helpful endeavor.
Yeah, definitely. And your point about the social media platforms, the various social media platforms that we have access to, making it easier to find opportunities like scholarships or financial aid. It's obvious. I think it's a great thing. I'm glad that you do too. But as you mentioned before, it is a minefield. I mean, there's no other way to say it. There is so much opportunity for people with bad intentions to look at this information and say, okay, I'm going to go, do malicious things now because I know that I will have an audience. I might even my chances of misleading somebody or completely taking advantage of a naive student or what have you are that much higher. And even in the article, it says, while 1 in 5 Gen Z students search for scholarships weekly on TikTok, 34% encounter misleading content. And on the other hand, students trust random current college students on the app, 59%, almost twice as much as certified financial advisors, 31%. And so we get to a point now where we're looking at these social media sites. TikTok, Instagram, even Snapchat, uh, Facebook, if you're, 90. But we look at these social media platforms, and we have to actually start asking ourselves the question, is this for real, or is this a scam? um, and because these sites are made to be addictive, and they're made to be addictive, they're made to and the way they get addictive, the how are they going to be addictive? Well, they're going to do that by shortening our attention spans. How are they going to do that? Well, by getting us addicted to short form videos. TikTok and Instagram have reels. Uh, and YouTube and Snapchat have shorts, and they're going to get us addicted that way. They're going to shorten our attention span, and there's even been multiple scientific studies that say that social media addiction in this way actually lowers our critical thinking skills. And you know, with all of that being said, there are genuine risks now associated with looking for scholarships and financial aid, things that have massive ramifications for undergraduates and even trade school participants and students that, let's be honest, didn't necessarily exist before, or rather existed, but were not at the level that they exist now, where you have to actually go onto Google. And if you're going to go onto Google, you might as well go onto your school scholarship website. Many colleges have them. I believe OU's is called CASH, CASH. It's an acronym, and I forget what it stands for. You know, but now you can just go onto TikTok, go onto Instagram, and start searching. And like we mentioned before on the college thing, there's a lot of people who are spreading misinformation, genuine misinformation, or just outright lying to benefit themselves. So, this is a real issue. I think, take all the opportunities you can get, but verify, verify, verify. Always make sure that what you're clicking on is the real deal. Always ask somebody in charge, hey, maybe you see something about OU, or you see something or you see something about a scholarship for let's say UT, or Kansas, or whatever. And just, the counselor is an email away, or the bursar's office is an email away. Just ask about it, verify, because that's what you have to do now. We've already established that there are people out there who have their interests at heart, not yours. And because of the popularity of social media, and because it scientifically dwindles our attention span and our critical thinking skills, we are vulnerable. And so just keep that at the top of mind. For sure, use social media to, aid in looking for scholarships and aid, uh, you know, but, but, but ask somebody, um, as we used to joke about as kids, because it was told to us a bunch, look for a trusted adult. um, but social media is it's a little bit of a double-edged sword in that regard. So verify your opportunities, look for your opportunities, um, but yeah, just be careful out there.
Yeah, I mean, that last bit is, I think, the most important, is being careful, knowing, like you said, having the critical thinking ability, right? Knowing where you're going to be taken advantage of and where you're not. And if you don't have that knowledge, then ask someone who may have that knowledge.
Right.
Ask for help. Um, something else I think is important that I didn't mention earlier is, yes, we do need to explore our opportunities with scholarships. We do need to look at federal financial aid and state programs and things like that in order to make our education more affordable. But let's be completely honest, the biggest thing with having an affordable education is choosing a school that's affordable. And I think a lot of people are stuck on the idea of, well, I've always idolized going to this particular college. And it just so happens that that college is three times as expensive as the college that's the next city over from them, right? Um, they say, I want to go to a private school, right, instead of a public institution where a lot of their fees will be subsidized essentially by the state. Uh, I chose to go to school out of state, but even though I did so, um, I actually went to a school where I was going to for free. So that's something that a lot of people didn't quite understand about my choice. I grew up in Mississippi. I grew up in Oxford, actually, the same city as Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is a decent school, right? Even Mississippi State, uh, where a lot of my friends from high school went to, the ones that are in STEM fields, they went to Mississippi State. That's another pretty good school, and the tuition for these schools is about $15,000 a year, give or take. At least it was when I was looking. It may have been raised in the 6 years since then, right? Uh, on the other hand, University of Oklahoma, out of state tuition, which is what I would be looking at, was something like $45,000 a year because it wasn't subsidized by the state because I was a non-resident. So that is something that we need to think about. I got scholarships to go to OU for free. The scholarships I got at home, even though it was a cheaper institution, I'd still end up having to pay. I think it was something like $7 or $8,000 to go to one of those schools. So if you have good grades and good connections, you're going to have opportunities to fellowships and additional scholarship programs. Like you said, we had the OU Cash portal. I applied for some things in there. At the end of the day, I think it was the National Merit Scholarship is what I got, which ended up paying for all of it so long as I was, in the honors college. So things like that are available to people that not only look for them but earn them. I'm not going to sit here and say that everyone should be given a free or very cheap education. I don't think that's feasible from a capitalistic standpoint. On the other hand, I do still think that if an education is something that you want, everyone should have the opportunity to do so. But that said, not everyone can go everywhere, right? Uh,
Mhm.
Even if you can't, even if I could afford Harvard, I know that Harvard would not have been a good place for me culturally and academically. So what's
Right.
the point of aspiring to somewhere where I'd have to pay $100,000 a year, face value, knowing that I more than likely would have dropped out and never finished my schooling, any type of schooling, to be honest with you. And now I'm saddled with $100,000 plus in debt.
Mhm.
Things like that don't make sense. And so the parents need to have the discussions with these children early on. But also, when you're looking for colleges, you're 16, 17, 18 years old, basically an adult. And I would hope that by that time you have developed a little bit of foresight to be able to make some good, decent decisions by the time you fully become an adult.
Right, right. Well, I remember I remember what I was like when I was 18. So, I heavily relied on my parents. I remember uh I remember in the advisor meeting that I had at OU when they first said to me, this is your decision. And my dad was in there with me. This is your decision. You can choose, your major and everything. This is your degree and all that. um of course, I of course, the way I am, I was ready for my dad to just, say, all right, well, we're leaving. uh because, but because, I'm, even though I was 18, I'm still a kid. And I knew that. I at least had the knowledge to know that, yeah, sure, you're 18, you're legally an adult, but you're not actually an adult. Uh, in my mind, there is a difference between the two. Uh, Again, I was an idiot when I was 18. Let's just be honest about that. I was kind of dumb. And but looking back on it now, I can still be an idiot sometimes, even at the ripe old age of 25. Um, but and so I still lean on my parents for some decisions. I'm now that my brain has been fully developed. Of course, I've grown tremendously, but 18-year-olds, they definitely need the right guidance from the right people, and in this case, it ought to be their parents. That's a different discussion for another time about how there are some really, really horrible parents out there. But for those of you who do have good parents, there is absolutely nothing wrong with, and of course, if they're good parents, this as well, of leaning on these people who have a lot more life lived than you. They've made a lot more mistakes than you have. Even though you think you've made more mistakes than them, you are wrong and you're kidding yourself. And it may be hard at first, but ask them, have conversations with your parents, no matter what the college tells you, because you tried to tell it to me. You that Sure, this is sure you're getting the loans, but your parents, at least the good ones. Again, like I said, that's a discussion for another time. But good parents, they do have your best interests at heart. They do want to help you, and they definitely don't want to see you saddled with a bunch of debt and having absolutely no uh, employable skills when you get out of college. Um, that being said, that's why I was pushed away from my degree when I first started college was actually journalism, and I was pushed away from that towards the business college because my dad told me, you can just be a journalist without a degree, right? And why are you doing this? You're going to end up with a bunch of debt at the end of 4 years, and quite honestly, you may not have you may not have any type of employable skills, because there's a lot to journalism, but there's not 4 years worth. And people are going to look at your journalism degree and maybe think something that you don't like. Why don't you go get a business degree? Why don't you go learn about the things that keep this economy turning, keep this economy going, and go from there? And you can write on this. There's nothing stopping you from being a journalist, but also uh, do something that is going to be beneficial for your life. And by the way, with that advice, I found something that employed me in large part because of my education that I absolutely love doing. And so, again, lean on your parents. Think for yourself. Obviously, this isn't saying don't think for yourself, but lean on your parents. Listen to what they say. They've made a lot more mistakes than you, and um, go from there. But um, really, I think the theme, maybe a little bit for this episode, uh, is that people are interested in different things. You may be interested in going to trade school. You may be interested in getting a 4 year degree, but there's nothing wrong with choosing one or the other. There's nothing wrong with going to trade school. There's nothing wrong with getting a 4 year degree. They can be, if you make the right decisions, equally employable, equally profitable to the person's intellect, and challenge the person to get better, the student rather, challenge the student to get better, to constantly improve themselves and instill lifelong values that they will take to their graves. People like doing different things. College isn't for everyone. And I've said this for a very long time. Maybe trade schools for you. Maybe no schooling at all. But don't but don't diminish people who don't demonize people who decide to go get a 4 year degree because that's what they're interested in. Um, just like I would say the exact same thing about people getting 4 year degrees, looking down on people who get trade school experience. They're both equally helpful for completely different professions. So, and you know, there's problems in both. There's people who go to trade school who get a bunch of debt and don't do anything with it. So, you know, all is well essentially, and we should stop listening to the fake social media influencers, stop listening to the misinformation about these 21-year-old quote unquote millionaires, and you know, just live life and just go enjoy yourself. And money isn't everything. There's a lot more to money, like you said, Neon. A lot more than money in life, like you said. And you know, just be yourself, live your life.
100%. But if you don't want to do all those things and you do just want to get rich quick, there is one guaranteed method to get rich quick: insider trading. All right, we got to talk about the fun stuff now. So, insider trading. According to the government, this is where you use information that is not available to the public in order to make an economic decision within a public market and essentially game that system and get an unfair advantage. This is exactly what one soldier did, one of the ones that was on the Maduro kidnapping operation at the beginning of the year. Okay. Wall Street Journal reports that the case against Gannon Clint Van Dyke, a master sergeant with the U.S. Army Special Forces, marks the first U.S. prosecution for insider trading in prediction markets. It follows months of public scrutiny of suspected insider trades and market manipulations on the platforms, as well as criticism of Polymarket for offering bets on war. Apparently, this guy knew that we would go and steal Maduro and went on Polymarket before this happened and made a decent sized bet that we in fact would do this. Of course, we did it. He knew we would, and after all was said and done, he got a $400,000 payoff. I think that this is, on one hand, extremely funny because he quite literally used information and knowledge of something that he was about to go do to take advantage of a publicly available system.
Right.
Let's be completely honest. With this particular thing, I consider it to be a victimless crime. The people who bet on the odds of us getting Maduro or not did so knowing that there was a chance that they could lose their money in either direction. Um, there never was with these prediction markets. Let me back up a little bit. With these prediction markets, when you place a bet, you either win and you get some amount of money, or you lose, meaning you're wrong, and you lose the money that you put in. There's no such thing as I wanna place a bet and then at some point the answer comes out and now I wanna get a little bit back at least. I don't want to lose my full investment. There's no such thing as that. So that's one of the main reasons why this is different from a traditional stock market. And that said, I feel that because of that, this guy should go free. On top of the fact it's just pretty funny, this guy should go free. Um, the article, and I don't want to get too political, but the article goes on to say that this is, quite hypocritical of the Trump administration, given that there are numerous accusations of Barron Trump and others connected to the presidency and the family committing insider trading on various actions that have taken place over the last few months. Um, ultimately, when what it comes down to for me is that we just have to make this decision as a country. Do we want to be free and have faith that our citizenry is going to at least pretend to be smart? Or do we want to have a government that's so totalitarian and locked down that everything is regulated into a point of gray dullness? I think there's a sweet spot in between those two options that we're still working to find. And as new technologies advance, then we'll have to again go through this process and find the sweet spot for those new technologies. But this is ultimately one of the reasons why prediction markets are up on the chopping block for this administration and other Congress people in the future about how they're going to regulate this, whether it's considered gambling, etc. Um, I kind of I want to know your opinion on this, Matt. But like I said, I just think this whole situation is very very funny.
Oh yeah, I think I can see the humor in it. Like I think it's funny too. He literally bet on himself, like, oh, I'm part of the team that's getting Maduro, and so he placed a large bet on himself, and he's like, uh, I think we're gonna go get Maduro. As he was, but it would be even funnier if he was like in the plane, say it was a C-130. If he was in the
It was a
C-130,
Black Hawk. It was a Black
oh,
Hawk.
so he was in the helicopter, and it would be so funny if he was in the helicopter and he's like, "We're gonna get Maduro," and that's when he placed the bet as they were getting Maduro, and that's what I'm envisioning in my head, and that's what makes it even funnier. But facetiousness aside, uh, we do have to talk a little bit of what this means culturally for really not just the United States, but the entire Western world. Um, um, because primarily because a large part outside of the Western world doesn't necessarily have access to these markets. But culturally speaking, are these markets a new asset class, or are they are they simply turning the entire world, including its geopolitics, into a massive casino? I think there's a really big question there's a really solid point to be made that maybe this is going a little too far, and obviously insider trading is a crime, and there's a huge reason why it's a crime. um, you're making, first of all, I'll just justify insider trading real quick. um, or not justify why it's a crime, rather. uh, okay, so you invest in Nvidia, meaning you think it'll go up. That's the only reason you would invest in it. And somebody who works for Nvidia knows that earnings went down, but the K10, which contains Nvidia's updated SEC required financial statements, doesn't release until, let's say, next month. But they go ahead and bet against Nvidia because they know that earnings went down, and they know exactly what the stock price is going to do when this information gets out. And that's not fair. That's not fair to the person investing. Every People are no longer on equal footing, and it has literally cost people their savings before. Yes, they're investing their own money. They know exactly what they're getting into. They know that they could lose their investment, but to lose it, it's not fair for them to lose their investment because somebody else came in who had more knowledge than anybody else, and it kind of comes off as not necessarily stealing, but using an unfair advantage that nobody else has in the market. and using that to their advantage. And I think that it making insider trading a crime is a good thing, and that kind of goes for this article as well. To remain logically consistent. Now, I don't necessarily know about the evidence that they've brought the evidence that they brought forward, that they can. Have they proven that he made this bet before the raid?
I honestly I have no clue where the evidence lies, but I think that because of how Polymarket works, he would have had to place the bet before the raid because once this, well, okay, I take it back because my understanding is that they did the raid at like 2 a.m. or something, but the report of it, which is what Polymarket eventually used to close the bidding, right, and settle the tab, came out a few hours after the actual operation. So
Right.
theoretically, he could have been in that gap time between when they did it and
Right.
when things were closed down that he paid. I don't know where that is, but
Or of course, like, is there evidence that he made the bet like before the operation was announced? Because in my opinion, him making the bet that we were going to we were going to kidnap Maduro after the operation was announced. It was the operation was announced, and so, you know, I don't know. That's when you start getting into a little washy, like, okay, but it's the United States going into Venezuela. You think that we don't have the ability to go kidnap their leader? I don't know. That's when it starts getting a little washy about, now if he made this bet before the plans were announced and everything like that, then okay, maybe that's a little insider trading. But and on top of that, I'm not sure how I feel about betting on the world's geopolitics. Just in general, I know I'm not a big casino fan, but all that aside, because people do gamble, and that's fine, I suppose. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is we're making the world a casino. We're betting on everything, and I don't necessarily know how healthy that is. um, we're it's like we're promoting the practice. We've seen people's lives be destroyed by their gambling addictions, and now it's just out in the mainstream. Uh, you could say similar things like alcohol and others and other many substances. I don't think that we should promote those things either. Uh, but Getting back on point here, I don't know how I feel about making the entire world a casino, and we're betting on everything. There has been not just this story, but other stories that come out against Polymarket and against the other large betting websites. There was even actually a sports article that came out. I forget who was involved, but NCAA investigations about whether or not players betted on themselves to either win or lose a game.
yeah, I mean
Um,
that's not a new thing. People have been betting against or for themselves and throwing matches and things like that for probably hundreds of years.
right.
But yeah, I mean it continues to be an issue, and that's your point, and I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that maybe not we already have laws for these. Maybe not regulation is the solution, because we already have laws for things. And it's not just it's not just this situation, but there's a lot of situations in which we have regulation for things that we already have laws for. And, in this case, insider trading is a crime. Uh, that's the trading
Not if
equivalent,
you're a politician.
evidently. But
Nancy
insider trading
Pelosi
is,
is more successful than Warren Buffett,
I'm,
who's
s-
the
I'm
most successful legitimate
right.
trader ever.
I'm shocked that she's beaten Inverse Kramer. That's what
Honestly,
I'm
bro.
shocked. I'm shocked she's beat Inverse Kramer. Inverse Kramer has done so well, and it got beat. But you know, again, we already have a law for this. It's called insider trading. It's the trading version of fraud, and so um, let's just enforce the law here. That because that stuff is obviously wrong, and it's wrong for good reason. And we as a country have come together and decided that those reasons were good, and so let's just enforce the law. I don't think, and again, just speaking from my perspective, let's not regulate this, or let's not make this a law. But I don't agree with making the world a casino, betting on events in the world. I think it's bad for people's health to just constantly be gambling. um, and that's my opinion on the whole thing. I'm still formulating a more formal version of that in my head, because quite honestly, I haven't really thought about it a lot. But yeah, let's try not to gamble so much.
Yeah, we stand pretty similarly on there. I mean, on one hand, it's kind of like, hey, let us do whatever we want, but on the other hand,
Right.
it's like, well, I don't want to have policies or programs in place that essentially incentivize war and
Right.
gamify killing. I really don't like that. But you can bet against pretty much anything on Polymarket, and maybe they should just add in some restrictions on what goes on the website. I don't know. That should help things out, but who knows? I just don't want to. I don't want to have someone betting on whether or not we go storm China. That
Exactly.
feels like a bad thing to me. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
but all that said, I think this episode was a pretty good and fun episode, especially with that last bit. Yeah, we
Right.
we do want to have a legitimate way to invest on things, and we can have fun on certain things. I don't think that
Mhm.
prediction markets themselves are a net negative, even though it does to some degree turn the world into a casino. Like I said, let's just put some restrictions on things like that. Um, Remember that even though you can do fraud and questionable things to get rich quick, ultimately what's gonna get you wealthy and happy in life is finding a career that you enjoy and working diligently every day. And of course, that starts with getting a good base, whether it's education, whether it's your foot in the door at a job, whatever it is. But on the side of education, people are getting into trade school more and more, which is a great thing. Um,
Absolutely.
let's just make sure that we can actually afford to go to the trade school, that we're looking for scholarships in the right place, and that we take everything that we see on the internet with a little bit of a grain of salt and try to get a more realistic, balanced, and expert take on things before we go. So thank you very much for watching this episode of Road to Riches. I'm Niamki Buchanan. I'm joined here with my co-host Matt White. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe to the podcast. New episodes come out every Thursday. We will see you next week.